Well, welcome everyone. We are gathered together again for another series and an educational awareness series for our nurse practitioner community service learning program. And we are always excited to meet with new people. And our special guest today has a nice story to think about. I'd say the circle of life as we think about some of the other people we've talked to and interviewed. And so we are going to think about the ways in which we all bring our own interests as well as our stories to the awareness to public ourselves in the visual impaired community, but also to the community of our caretakers and the community at large. So I'll ask members in our community that are regular months distinguishes me from being someone who doesn't recognize my voice. And we always want to make sure we have good communication. So I am middle-aged, ground of gray hair. Today I'm wearing a green sweater and thinking about ways in which we can identify ourselves from our voice and from our stories. I'll pass it over to our other speakers. First, Liz, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and before we meet our special guest.
Hello, everybody. This is attorney Liz Miska. I believe I am wearing a black top, not sure, and that's not to be confused with black top on pavement. I have shoulder length, brown hair, I think, no glasses, and I will admit to middle age. And I am going to toss it to Maria.
Hi, everybody. My name is Maria. I am wearing a blue flowery top. My hair is brown and a little bit longer than shoulder length. And I wear glasses, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor.
Well, thank you, Liz and Maria. And tonight we are speaking with a young woman who can identify how she likes to tell her story. And CJ, introduce yourself to us and to our viewers. And we'd like to just make a simple, very nice conversation today to tell us about your story and your journey through life. CJ.
My thought right now, believe it or not, on my computer, I get this workshop and they're always saying, tell your story. And I shut it off completely. I just go to the next email. So this is amazing that here I'm going to today to be telling my story. Of course, you have to think. And first I have to tell you what I have on, I guess, following all the rest. I have a blue sweater, and because it's Valentine's coming up, my mother was crazy about that. I have a heart on, a little heart that hangs just below my neck. So that finishes that. And now when I think of my story, I kind of go back and it always hits me. I don't know why, but when I was teaching Sunday school to kindergarten, they wanted to know what life was like before God came. And I thought to myself, my God, they're higher than kindergarten kids, but I'll try. So I happen to think about this all the time. I told them to close their eyes and I'll close my eyes. And then when we see what it's like when we close our eyes, that's what it was before anything came about. And I couldn't wait to open my eyes, to tell you the truth. And then when I did, all the eyes were looking at me. No one closed their eyes. And I thought myself, no wonder I couldn't stand my eyes being closed. But then when it came to the point that there was question of my diagnosis and the thought of losing eyesight, I don't know, that comes back, that I had to close my eyes. And I think that was probably meant to be. that I had to appreciate what it was like to be in the darkness and what it was like to see. So that was the beginning when I think of my diagnosis. And my diagnosis is, you can't even pronounce it, but it's pseudoxanthoma elasticum. It's like macular degeneration, but it's better known as PXE. So people might know that. And when I started with this so many years ago, people now are familiar. The eye doctors, when I go there, there's more people with PXE. They know what it is. When I first started, very few doctors knew what it was. And the way I knew, I had moved to Denver in my middle 40s, close to 50. And that's when you get PXE, if it's going to happen to your eyes in your from 45 to 55. Those are the ages that they guess it comes about, if it's going to happen. And I was at a play with a boyfriend who happened to be a physician. And I was watching the play and I said to him, something's not right. There's a hole right in the middle of the play that I can't see. It's just a cutout hole. And so he said, that's not normal. So he advised me the next day to go to an ophthalmologist when I couldn't get an appointment. So I went to an optometrist, and he looked at my eye and he said, you need to go right away to an ophthalmologist. And he called an ophthalmologist, a retina specialist who he knew, and he took me the next day. And he told me, you have pseudoxanthoma elasticum. And he said, you really have to, and he said, it looks like it's progressing. I don't know that much about it, but there's a Dr. Schatz in San Francisco, and I advise you to go there as soon as possible. So I went to Dr. Schatz in San Francisco, and he said that I had a choice, either to laser it or let it alone. So he said, why don't you think about it overnight and let me know in the morning? He said, if you laser it, there'll be a spot there that there wouldn't be if you left it alone. It would just be, you would lose your central vision slowly. So he said, and if you leave it alone, then it'll be just like you would have macular degeneration or losing your central vision, but there wouldn't be a dark spot there. So I said, okay. Well, I came back and he said, your boyfriend called me and I told him not to advise you as to what decision. It has to be your decision. So I said, okay. So I made up my decision not to have it lasered. And I went back, and within a week, my eyesight, my central vision was gone in my right eye, in my left eye, excuse me. And at the time, I was in so-called Hollywood. They called it in Denver. LA was coming to Denver, and I joined an agency of acting. And I was on set with Perry Mason, the shows and all that. And I was trying to figure out my eyesight because I was just losing it. And Dr. Schatz told me, really in the light, you should wear sunglasses. And I used to wear sunglasses during takes and things like that. And they say, what do you have your sunglasses on for? So I was really fighting to stay adrift, to tell you the truth. And I finally, it went. I could tell. I closed my eyes and I used the Amsler grid, and it showed that it had darkened in the middle of the central vision on the chart. which the chart really works pretty good. Anyhow, my life went on, and I learned about whatever I knew about PXE was from the eyes. And then when I was in Denver, I had a massive bleed, and I was rushed to the hospital. And I had had this before, way back when in my 20s, and the doctors at St. Vincent's didn't know what it was. They just labeled it as gastroenterology. I mean, a gastric bleed. And they never took a biopsy. So they did when I was at Denver. And the gastroenterologist came over to me when I was in emergency and said, I need to go to the library to look this up. I have no idea what this is. So that right there, when I tell you, hit me. And I went on because that's the way I am. And I just kept on going what happened to me and what needed to be. Well, I was in the hospital like the last time when I was in my 20s, about 3 weeks. And I had gone through a massive bleed, and then they found where the bleeding was and they operated. And my boyfriend happened to be at the hospital when I was in intensive care. And he said, you know, I just said, this time I want to die. And I said, but I've never said that in my life. And he looked up on the grid and he said, there's that. I won't tell you what he said, but there's that. And he told the other doctor, and they looked at it. They found where the bleed was coming from. Well, they operated. They sent me to the operation. And at that point, I know I went over to the other side. That's all I could hear was the doctor, and I never got, this is a regret of mine, I never forgot to go talk to him and thank him. He kept on yelling at me, Carolyn, don't you dare die. Don't you dare die. And I remember going over to my, the right side, and I said, oh, which I had. I just got back from the East Coast, and probably I just saw everybody there. Then I went over to the other side, and this other side was drawing me in to this feeling that I can't tell you how wonderful it was. I just wanted to stay there, and I kept on hearing. He kept on yelling, don't you dare die, Carolyn, don't you dare die. And I kept on hearing it, but I just wanted to go further because it was so beautiful. The only way I can explain it is bliss, complete bliss. And all of a sudden he screamed, and I said, oh, and for us, this must have happened in seconds, I'm sure. But I said, it's not my time. It's not my time. I'm going back. And I did. And I don't remember waking up, but when I did, it was later. And I got better. And I went back to the movie scene and where I was and all that. But I found it more difficult with my eyesight. And then I had another experience. I was still doing this and acting, doing different, taking classes and lessons and everything. And then I'm trying to remember. And then I was planning to move. I had a house, and I was coming back from the hardware store, and I had someone working at the house, and a drunk driver came in back of me and pushed my car into a truck in front of me, and I was thrown from the car. Well, there I had just been, believe it or not, if anyone heard of Deepak Chopra, I had gone to his place on the East Coast before I came back to Denver. And I remember him saying that wherever your mind is, you can change it. And he gave us exercises and all that. And that's just what I did. I kept on holding my head, and they kept on taking it down because it was bleeding. It kept on holding my head because I was meditating. I was saying, let this, because I believe mind over matter. And I just kept on saying that it's going to close and I'm fine. It's going to heal and I'm fine. And everything about me is fine. And they kept on taking my hand down and putting something on it or whatever. But anyhow, I ended up being fine. I ended up, stitches on my head. And I ended up pulling myself together. And what I did to pull myself together was I have to find out about this PXE. Now it's gone to all these things where I hit my head, and you're not supposed to hit your head with PXE. It's been too long. I'm going to find out about it. And I did. I went to Texas. I met the doctor at the hospital that wrote a book on PXE. He said that I should go back and start an organization. I did. And we made it a national foundation in Denver. But so I guess I knew finally more about PXE, which people with PXE really, they don't kind of collaborate and hang around and get together. For some reason, I was president out there and I started the organization and got a place for us to have our office. And I didn't see a lot of collaboration, and I don't know why, because I went to the East Coast and I started an organization, a chapter on the East Coast. And the doctor, he was in Texas, and I didn't get along with him for some reason, but I didn't think I didn't get along with him. He didn't want any type of chapters. He wanted our chapter to go up to Chicago and stay there go to LA, stay there for a while, go down south, stay there, and start a whole new chapter. And I didn't argue with him. I just didn't pay attention to him. Because when I went to New York to see the doctors about my eyes in New York, they were the top doctors. They said, do not have one chapter. Denver is perfect. You have a perfect area, everything in the middle, and keep your organization there. It'll never last the other way. So I started the organization. He was upset. Well, the organization went way ahead him, went to Washington, started PXE International. And this organization is worldwide. And I keep in touch with her, and I've been to their seminars and been to everything that they have. And so PXE, I think, was political in a sense. Who invented this in the beginning and who's doing the most? Well, I always go to two sides. It doesn't matter to me. PXE is PXE. And today it's gotten so much recognition. I'm so happy. And I think more people know about it too, because when I went to my physician, I said to him, have you known about PXE and how many patients do you have? And he says, yeah. And I always went to one that had PXE. And the one now has a lot of patients with PXE. And that's just wonderful in a sense. Not that all these people have PXE, but what I found out about PXE, And my impression of myself, I think, is just to move on. You know, whatever happens, move on. I moved from Colorado, left the chapter, and that particular chapter was called NAPE. Went to different areas the way this doctor wanted it to go, and it fizzled out. So I had called one time just to see what it was doing, and he says, I don't even talk to this doctor. So anyhow, that chapter was gone. And the political area of it was gone. I was so happy. And I forgot what I was saying, except the fact that it's moving, it's PXE International. Oh, that's right. What I found out about it is it's not that good. But of course, I listen to it and move on. I don't pay attention to it. It said that PXE is an old age disease. And I remember reading about it in a brochure so many years ago, but I guess I didn't pay too much about it. And now that I'm reaching my elder age, I'm starting to think about it, because your organs in your body become older than what you really are. So I'm starting to think about it, because I'm saying, well, now that I'm, knock on wood, there's no wood here. My head. Should I do my head? But knock on wood, I say that it's probably true, because they say it's true. But I'm 81, and I have to really, probably, that's when now, of all the years that I've had it in my middle, that I've had it all my life, to tell you the truth. But to recognize that you had it, it starts with the eyes and the skin. I don't have a lot of manifestations of the skin. And what I got was the cardiovascular and the internal, and that's why I had two major bleeds. And with PXE, you just never know, I guess. But I think it has a little to do with, might have a little to do with stress, because stress, everything now has anything to do with stress. But I think of being in the acting field and doing a lot of things that I did, it might have, been a little stressful. But I'm just happy to be who I am. And I don't pay attention to it. I really don't. And I thought about that, I thought about the things that I've done. I've done it. It's gone. I got it. It's gone, and I think that's how I live today. So, I did graduate. I did eventually leave Denver. My son was still there. My daughter-in-law came to Massachusetts, came to Lincoln Street, opened the first Target store in Massachusetts. So my daughter was having a baby, and it was time to leave. And I left. And I left Denver, came back to Worcester, and started again. And when I came here, I wanted to know what was Worcester, what was the difference of Worcester. And I end up moving right near the museum, the historical museum. And I decided, something, I always wanted to know how Worcester formed, how it started. So I went down to the museum, and I met this woman who at the time, with my eyesight, I wasn't the greatest typist. I was a pretty good typist, but my eyesight, I couldn't read a lot. Oh, yeah, I never mentioned my eyesight and all this that I'm talking about. That's because I forgot it. There's too many other interesting things to talk about. My eyesight.
I say secondary.
Yeah,
Secondary, right?
yeah. So anyhow, to make a long story short, the book that I started, she volunteered her time to come here. So every Monday she'd come up because it was just the other end of the block at the Linden House. And I said, okay, this is what we got after about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months of reading anything. I said, look it, we've got so many things. What's the first of Worcester? I mean, can you believe this? I mean, are we going to worry about the glaciers making 7 hills? We can talk about the 7 hills because it said Worcester's the 7 hills. Excuse me. Anyhow, we both looked at everything we got and we said that I said this book has to change. And I always say a book writes itself. You don't write the book writes itself. And it ended up being Worcester Stacks Up First and Fun Facts. In the beginning of the book, it was all the first of Worcester, and there were so many. The second part, I said, you can't leave any of this out. 7 hills, all the other interesting things about the who went to Worcester Academy and everything. So the second part was questions and answers. The question was there, and then the answer was in the back of the book, and that's how it got formed, and that's how that book got done. So I look and I say, I really want to write another book. I wanted to write it since I remember being coming back. I went to, I'm thinking again, all these things. I went to London because I was living in Denver, and the doctor had come up from Texas and said, you should go to London, to meet the group in London. There was a big PXC group. So I did. I ended up going, and on the way back, I used to see all these pictures of this Deepak Chopra. It was on the beginning of Time magazine. Someone had sent me something from being in the hospital when I was in there. And Deepak Chopra. So then I found out that in Mendon, Mass, he has a big building that was Indian in Maharashi, and it was all about health. So I went there. And when I was there, I remember asking people who were there about this idea that I had about religion and about why people think it's so different. And anyhow, I think back then, because I thought to myself, is this something new you're thinking about, or why is this coming back again? And then it's been with me since, because it's still, I wanted to write another book about, I found my mother and father's letters about World War II. And I thought, how interesting this is. But the senior center found out about it and put a whole thing together. And I had my sisters there, and I showed my mother and father's pictures on the screen and what love was like then. So I said, no, I've done that. And that's what I was going to do, write a book. And people had sent me things about World War II couples that people wrote books about. And I wasn't crazy about them, the books. And again, that's what's hitting me. I'm saying, before I die, what about that book? And it's so difficult. It's the most difficult book in the world to write, because how can you tell people and talk about religion? How can you tell people that their religion is not the best? You don't. That's their religion. That's what they chose, to love and to be close to the Almighty and to God, whoever they call their provider. So you can't go that way. And so I've been now reading a book that I heard about on the internet. And it's the I'm reading it and I'm thinking the name of it. It's by Houston Smith. And I've heard his name ever since, probably about 5 or 6 times. And I'm reading the book, it's very deep. It's about the world of religions. And I said, well, before I write this other book, I have to read this. So that's where I am now. I'm reading a very difficult book and I'm trying to understand it all. And I'm wondering if I'm ever going to be able to put this together so that people will understand that whatever their religion or their country, that's perfect for them. And there's no reason to fight over it because the similarity of all of us is the big one thing. So, but that's hard. It's hard to write about. So that's where I am now. Reading as much as I can to see if there's a way that I could get it across that we should love each other and honor our neighbor and stop the fighting. I just read on my phone, it came Diana Cooper, and she wrote the golden future. And honest to God, it came on the 4th chapter of it, and I read the whole thing. It was channeled in England. I didn't know about anything. I just ended up reading it. And it gave me so much hope. It just did. Hope for our world. And I sent out a holiday letter and I put it in that because whether it's right or wrong or anything, it just gives you hope. It's just wonderful. Yeah.
PJ, this is Liz.
Yes.
I see lots of parallels in your story, and I just want to pick up on the last point about people. Oftentimes, when Dr. Mike and I and Maria are talking, because all of us, like yourself, are visually impaired, we talk about, well, we're people at different stages of life, different backgrounds, and the only difference between us and other people is our eyes don't work. But we don't want to be disenfranchised in all of the other realms of life. And when you use the word provider, when you were referencing religion, I just thought that was interesting because I think healthcare providers are dispensing a certain kind of religion, so to speak, that has to do with medicine or pharmaceuticals or whatever. And I'm just wondering if Dr. Mike and Maria, did you
It was
pick up something?
I've never related to the universe as the provider, but
No, but it sounds like you have a strong faith.
It is it is a provider for me, but there's so many names that you can name besides a provider. I just lost words. But I wouldn't have said, in a book, my provider, but I might, I don't know. But I haven't talked about my eyesight at this point, how frustrating it is. Because I'm at the end of trying to write a book, which I wrote before when I was visually impaired. And it just wasn't that difficult because I could see more. I could do more. I can't now. So I'm using all new providers of equipment, of people, of everything to help me. And I am open to it. And I'm so appreciative of the people that come. I have someone that from the Mass Association of the Blind who volunteered to come here. And I'm just so lucky. And I have providers from Tempest. I'm so lucky. And I really don't ask people for things a lot in my past, but I've come to the conclusion that if I need help, I ask for it. And I'm going to be going to the what's the school I'm blinking out?
Carroll Center.
Carroll Center. The Carroll Center. And I was going to go in December, then we can't. And now it won't be till probably April because of my schedule. And that's fine because they said that I should go in the spring now. But anyhow, I do find it difficult. I do find it difficult, especially because I'm not technically oriented, and that's where I find it difficult. Going out, arranging rides, going to affairs, I take what I get. I take what's in front of me. But technically, it's for me, I can say not very comfortable at all. It's frustrating. And that's the only time that I'm really frustrated with knowing how to do certain equipment. And it seems like you can't do that unless you have the equipment or people to help you or to learn it. And because I'm so untechnical, it's really a struggle, but I do it. I do as much as I can. And I don't give it up. That's it. I'm just more frustrated and more frustrated. And that's the
See,
way I am.
CJ, this is Dr. Mike. There's just yeah, thanks for sharing your story. There's just so many things as I listen through it all that we can take out pieces of it and think about, how you have persevered. And I'll use that last comment you made about now you're frustrated. But we in medicine, we typically think of, the telemedicine aspects of technology and this whole change of healthcare and providing health through, a computer, which you're describing, having difficulty doing. But we also think about your story in relation to your willingness to make those adaptations, your resilience to kind of forget about your eyesight. You didn't talk about your eyesight for a majority of your story because you went forward to do the things that you wanted to do and you fought back. You recognized that the doctor you spoke to in Texas didn't really match to what your goals were, and you moved forward to try to make the PXC chapter and movement to go beyond than just what he had imagined or thought about. Those things are what we as providers have to listen to. Unfortunately, in healthcare, a lot of times we don't have the time to hear that story. It's very quick. We go in, we go out, we have 5 and 10 minutes, and you can't get that background, and we miss it because that's what helps us think about maybe the best way to treat people like yourself and we address the functionality of all the things that you wanted to do rather than just focusing on, oh, well, we just don't talk about those things. We just got to look at your eyesight today. So I appreciate your story and your resilience to make those adaptations. And as you describe it, if we think about the kind of comical aspect of it, of you're now only complaining of your frustration in your later years because you're trying to write your book and to try to get things on on computer, on paper, where you may not have complained about that earlier years. And it really is, again, to your credit of how you've gone through your life of getting to this point, being frustrated now, where other people may be frustrated immediately when they started losing their eyesight and then fold or have difficulties adapting or coping. And I'll leave that with Maria, your comments, the concept of way which some people have the resilience. Some people, obviously, we all need support, we all need help, but can you pick out and how do we identify patients that are people that you make the difference on their own, and who do we ask for the additional help to get people through their issues?
I think you make a good point. And CJ, thank you so much for sharing your story. Definitely fascinating. And also thank you so much for sharing the fact that it is frustrating, that it isn't always like a road of like flowers and it's all pink and wonderful and unicorns. Um, Especially because a lot of the times, like as providers, we think, oh, you need services. Let me get you services. And it looks very well on paper and they look amazing and they look fantastic. And then the practice, sometimes it's not what the theory says. But back to the resilience piece, I think as providers, it is important as well to figure out where the person is coming from. So the person is not just the diagnosis, whatever it might be. Who is this person? What is their walk of life? How did they get to you? Do they have supports? Do they have a family that cares about them? Do they have help? Are they alone? What is their, like all the, what makes the person a person? And what are the supports? Because honestly, like resilience is again a word that's very nice, very broadly researched at this point too. But a person cannot necessarily do it by themselves, especially when they're already tackling the monumental task of accepting whatever the diagnosis is and whatever it actually means to them and internally and externally. So figuring out the supports, figuring out who they are, figuring out what other external supports other than family are available, like etc., is absolutely vital in my opinion.
Thank you.
This is Dr. Mike again, and I also always love to think about medicine. I always think about the nature of the diagnosis also, but what's interesting about your story way back at the beginning, so each of us online today in this conversation have what we could all call relatively a rare disorder. The amount of people who have these conditions between myself as Stargardt's and others are retinitis pigmentosa and your PXZ. There's not a lot of people, although like you mentioned, there's more groups that get together to learn about these retinal diseases, but yet they're not very common like you think about heart disease or other common medical problems. However, because they're again small in nature, you have to start thinking as providers of medical aspects of that maybe someone put together that these bleeding episodes you had may be connected to something else. If we don't open up our eyes and thought processes to say, oh, this person just has, a central vision loss, and you came on, like actually each of us in online today, are late onset disorders where Stargardt's, for instance, myself, the commonality is to be diagnosed when you're when you're a teenager, or when you're even less than 10 years of age. I didn't have my diagnosis into my 40s. So you could have easily been identified as macular degeneration and just started getting injections for macular degeneration, which may have been a disaster because of the bleeding concerns. So we have to think about in our medical providers to put the pieces together, and that's what's hard. And you had some good doctors that you described in your story that they wanted to go to the library and look it up and said something didn't seem so simple. They may not have known much about it. And many times we refer people to other specialists, but some of us or your doctors will start thinking, let me go look this up and try to put pieces together. So there's, for instance, a medical condition with RP, retinitis pigmentosa, where people don't hear as well. And is it a coincidence that someone didn't have hearing as well as loss of vision and loss of hearing? Well, there's a condition called Usher's syndrome that have both the two disorders together. And if someone wasn't thinking about how to put those pieces together, they may have completely been misdiagnosed or diagnosed with other problems that really weren't connected. So it is really intriguing to think about. We all have to speak up for ourselves and be our own advocate, as well as seek out proper evaluations to get the right diagnosis so we can move forward and go ahead and move on to our lives, which is interesting in your story from the medical perspective.
I know that when I was president in head of PXC in Denver, that I tried to get people to talk about the gastric
Mm.
and they didn't want to do it. They wanted the skin, and we had dermatologists, and I wrote the newsletters and I headed it. So I wrote one. The last one I wrote was on gastric until he kicked me out. But I got it in. And then when I went to England, I couldn't believe the people that had gastric bleeds.
Mm.
So, it's you find out more and more, and you just try to make it better. And
Very true.
finally, the Terrys that took over and is in Washington, D.C., took over PXC International. They had 2 children young with PXC. So they went worldwide, and they found that there were more people with gastric bleeds too. So, but you have to advocate for everything, it seems.
Very much.
And
Very
this is, I just want to, I don't know, are we running out of time, Dr. Mike?
We got 3 or 4 minutes. We can kind of think about our last comments, but yeah, we're coming to the end of the hour.
Okay, well, the reason I was just want to pick up on that point about what I perceive as blind passivity or systems making us passive and making us exhibit patience as opposed, I mean, we are all patients, but
Mhm.
and saying, well, we'll get around to it. And CJ, what I hear in your story is, yeah, you might get around to it, but I might not be around for you to get around to it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take the bull by the horns and push the envelope and push people to say, let's think about this, let's think about that. And I think that goes to Maria's comment about resilience and Dr. Mike's about perseverance. But again, I just see, and this is just my own anecdotal observation, that I think we as visually impaired blind people, we tend to be in some instances passive because it's, as Dr. Mike said, these are rare conditions. And it's kind of like, well, wait your turn. But, good for all of us. We're not waiting our turn. We're speaking up. And that goes to your point about advocacy. That we can't wait because it's very easy to overlook us because we are invisible. But what we do have is our voices, and raising our voices together. And that goes back to your point about collaboration. There may be individuals who profess to want to collaborate, but really don't. It's about them and about their careers, rather than about furthering a cause. So again, commendations to you, CJ. That was a really good capstone to what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
We really do appreciate your time coming today. We are coming towards the end of our hour. We, a lot of information you had given us, but any kind of last thoughts, thinking about our viewers today are people in training for medical providers, a group of nurse practitioners, and as our viewers in our community, hopefully will also look to learn a little something about PXE and about resilience and whatever we come up with. But any last thoughts, CJ, about what you like to have other people think about in relation to visual impairment and your story as you've gone through your journey?
Well, your education, what you're doing now, is just very helpful. And to the nurse practitioners, I think I'm going into another avenue I've always thought that our minds are more powerful than we think. All the sayings that we are what we think, what you think materializes. I mean, these sayings throughout the years haven't been there for nothing. I mean, people are very, doctors will even say it. My doctor, who I go to, he's in sync with me. And I'm just thrilled about it that I went to a doctor just recently, quickly, and I had something in my stomach that was deadly. And if it would explode, then I was going to die immediately. And they said, get to the hospital if you see that pain. Well, I went there and I told the gastro doctor, I said, listen, I want to leave by Tuesday because my son's coming from Colorado. He rented a place. He said, well, we'll talk about it. You know, he just appeased me. Then I want to tell you, come Sunday, he came to visit me and he says, you're not going to believe this, but it's not there in your stomach anymore. And I said, I know. I said, do you believe me that it's not there? He says, yes, because I saw it and then I don't see it. He says, I believe you. So I just said, thank you, that I wasn't crazy. And that's all I can tell you is that we are within ourselves powerful. We are, whether, you know, God's by our side, whether it doesn't matter, you know, whoever we go, you know, there was a Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. I read that. And he said, and he left the medical field, teaching medicine, to go around to the world. But he said that every single cell in our body is connected to our brain. So he said, wherever you are in your body, you should start looking at that it's connected to every cell in what you think. And who knows? I mean, I'm going to die of something, that's for sure. We're all going to die of something. But
Stay put though.
yeah, in the meantime, I will go what all these people have said, you know, what you think, believe. So if you're thinking negative, don't believe it. Just think positive.
We appreciate it so much, CJ, and once again, we really do thank you to telling us our story, your story to us and our viewers. It really does fill in a lot of gaps and reconfirms a lot of things that we speak about and talk about in our awareness concept and our advocacy and adaptability and things that we like to all have in common with one another, but also to educate. And we, again, appreciate your time today.
And I thank you wholeheartedly, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, that will wrap us up today for this wonderful story and time for our series to continue and bring more education awareness to our viewers. Thanks so much.